Lemuel Smith, the son of a minister, accused of luring Donna Payant into the prison chaplain's office where he was free to roam. The charge, first-degree murder. The possible sentence, if convicted, death in the electric chair.
May 15, 1981. After receiving a call, correction officer Donna Payton went to the prison chaplain's office and never came back. Later, they found her mutilated body. She was the first female prison guard killed on duty in the U.S., and she wouldn't be the last. We have stories of female prison guards getting killed by inmates.
An emotional day in southern Colorado. Early this morning, during breakfast preparations, DOC officials say 2 female officers were violently attacked in the kitchen here at the Arkansas Valley Prison.
September 24th, 2012 started as a Monday morning like any other at Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility in Ordway, Colorado. Inside the prison kitchen, 999 inmates were about to be served breakfast. Standing there, making sure everything ran smoothly, was Sergeant Mary Ricard. Now, she had done this countless times before, making sure the food was prepped, watching over the inmates, keeping order. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that one of them had already made up his mind. This is the day he's gonna kill her. And before anyone could stop him, he did. And the thing is, for most inmates, Mary wasn't just some uniform patrolling the prison halls. She was one of the good ones. She was the kind of person who saw them as human beings, not just criminals. According to Mary's husband, it wasn't just a job for her. It was a calling. Mary had always believed in second chances, in redemption. She didn't just supervise inmates. She tried helping them. She would teach them how to cook, encourage them to learn new skills, and even had plans to start a pastry class. She figured that if they had something to look forward to, maybe they wouldn't want to come back here. But prisons don't run on good intentions alone. That morning, Mary was in the kitchen, surrounded by inmates. One of them was Miguel Contreras Perez, a convicted child rapist, serving 35 years to life. In a flash, everything changed. Miguel grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her in the neck. And that was all it took, one fatal wound. Her fellow officer, Sergeant Lori Gann, saw what was happening and tried to help. But Contreras Perez turned the knife on her as well. She fought back, but the attack left her critically injured. And here's where things get even more disturbing. Now, years before, Contreras Perez had been at a different prison, Buena Vista Correctional Facility. Guess who worked there at the same time? Mary. They'd crossed paths before. She'd worked in the kitchen there as well. But was this revenge? A grudge? Or maybe just a crime of opportunity? We may never know the motive behind that attack, but what we do know is that it was a tragedy that shouldn't have been possible. Mary's daughter, Katie Smith, later said,
"My mother would have had no anger for this inmate. She would forgive him instantly."
Imagine that. Your mother brutally murdered, and the first thing you can think of is forgiveness. That tells you everything you need to know about the kind of person Mary Ricard was.
For me personally, to make that decision to take his life would be no different than him taking my mom's life, and 2 wrongs never make a right.
Following the murder, prosecutors kept pushing for the death penalty for nearly 7 years. They knew that Miguel wasn't just a murderer. He kept making threats. Even after killing Mary, he said he'd do it again. But in 2019, a deal was made. He pled guilty to Mary's murder and the attempted murder of Lori Gann. His sentence was life in prison plus 48 years. It's something. But for those who knew Mary, it'll never feel like enough. Even the inmates in the prison were mourning her loss. June 26, 1997, Diane Levine, a widow and mother of 2, had just finished her shift at Montreal's Bordeaux jail. And she got into her van, probably looking forward to unwinding at home. She had no idea she was being watched. And as she drove onto the Laurentian Highway, a motorcycle pulled up beside her. Then, in an instant, a barrage of bullets ripped through her van. She never stood a chance. Her murder would shake Quebec. It wasn't random. It wasn't a robbery. Diane was just a prison guard, just doing her job. But in 1997, Quebec's biker wars were raging. Rival gangs were killing each other left and right, but attacking a gang member meant risking retaliation. So they went for an easier target. Stefan Gadas Ganya, the man who pulled the trigger, later said,
"Prison guards can't kill you."
and so Diane became a pawn in a war she had nothing to do with. Her death was a message to the justice system, to law enforcement, to anyone who thought they were untouchable. And what about her killer? Well, believe it or not, Ganya wasn't some cold, calculated assassin. He was a guy spending his whole life trying to prove something. He was bullied as a kid. In high school, he started dealing drugs, realizing that money meant power. And from there, it was a straight shot to stealing cars, making thousands of dollars a week, and running with the Hells Angels. But in that world, money wasn't enough. He later admitted,
"If you didn't kill, you didn't move up."
and that summer, the orders came down. Kill a prison guard. He had a choice. Say no and risk being killed himself, or do what was expected of him. He got on a motorcycle, followed Diane's van, and did what he was told. When the news of Diane's murder broke, it was everywhere. At home, Ganya's wife saw the headlines and made an offhand comment saying,
"Whoever did that must be a disgusting person."
how could she have known her own husband was the killer? And instead of feeling guilt, Ganya went to Maurice Montboucher, the Hells Angels leader who ordered the hit, looking for approval. And he got it. 3 months later, Ganya was involved in another prison guard shooting. This time, he was caught. He was facing life behind bars. But there was one way out: testify against Boucher. And so he made a deal with authorities in exchange for leniency. 2002, after 2 trials, Boucher was convicted of first-degree murder. Thanks to Ganya's testimony, one of the most dangerous men in Canada was put away for life. As for Ganya, he pled guilty to first-degree murder for killing Diane and attempted murder for the second attack. He was given life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. But prison wasn't safe for him either. He had betrayed the gang, and they all wanted him dead. He spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, constantly looking over his shoulder. Years passed, and then, in 2023, something changed. After more than 25 years behind bars, Ganya became eligible for parole. And suddenly, the question wasn't just about him. It was about Diane's family. Her youngest daughter wanted him to stay locked up, but her eldest, Isabel Doust, had a different perspective. Now, she knew nothing would bring her mother back, and she also knew her mother believed in second chances. She said,
"He pulled the trigger, but the orders came from higher up. He helped put Boucher away. Maybe he deserves a second chance."
February 2023, the National Parole Board grants Ganya permission to live in a halfway house as a prelude to his release from prison. We're still in Canada, and this is the story of the first female correctional officer to be ever killed there. Now, May 25, 1925, Margaret Mick had just started her shift at the Toronto Municipal Jail Farm for women. She would work there for years, keeping order, making sure the women in her care were safe, even the ones society had forgotten. She was the only staff member on duty that night. No one knew it would be her last shift. At 10:15 p.m., while she was checking on the inmates, she was attacked from behind. She fought back, but she was 64 years old, alone, and outnumbered. By morning, she was still there, tied up, lifeless, left behind by the very people she had once tried to help. Margaret Mick wasn't just a prison matron, she was a mother, a widow, and a fighter. In 1860, she was born in Waterdown, Ontario, and then married young, having 4 children. When her husband James Mick died unexpectedly in the late 1890s, life gave her a choice: break apart her family or find a way to survive. Most women in her position would have been forced to give up their kids, but not Margaret. She packed up and moved to Toronto, where she took a job at the Andrew Mercer Reformatory for Women. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a steady paycheck, one that kept her family together. Now, eventually, she was transferred to the Toronto Municipal Jail Farm for Women, a facility focusing on rehabilitation. This place really wanted to give women a fresh start, and Margaret believed in that mission. But not everybody would appreciate that. That Sunday night, inmate Jenny McMinn had a plan. She had smuggled in a spoon to break out of her cell, and then unlocked another inmate's door. The 2 girls waited. Then their third accomplice, Isabel Prowse, called out, faking a water leak in her cell. When Margaret unlocked the door to check, they jumped her. She was beaten, dragged to a utility room, and tied to pipes. They left her there, unconscious. Before escaping, one of them did something haunting. They placed a pillow under her head, kissed her cheek, and left a glass of water nearby. Maybe it was guilt, maybe regret. Either way, they still left her there to die. The 3 escapees were caught 2 days later. The crime was all over the news, but instead of focusing on Margaret, the media became obsessed with her killers. Were they cold-blooded criminals or just girls who made a mistake? The public couldn't decide. The 3 were charged with murder, but in the end, they would each only serve 5 years. It wasn't until 2005, 80 years after her death, that she was finally added to Canada's Peace Officers Memorial in Ottawa. During the ceremony, Senator Lorna Milne spoke about her, saying,
"She was an uncommon woman with uncommon bravery."
And she was right. Margaret held the family together when society told her to give up. She worked a job few women did at that time. She believed in second chances, in rehabilitation, in helping people turn their lives around. And yet, when she needed some help, no one was there to save her. It's June 9th, 1975, again in Canada. Mary Steinhauser walks into the BC penitentiary that morning, like she had so many times before. She wasn't a guard. She didn't carry a weapon. She wasn't there to punish anyone. Mary was a social worker and a prison classification officer, someone who believed in rehabilitation, not just incarceration. She wanted the prisoners to be treated like human beings, not just criminals. She was especially outspoken about solitary confinement, calling it cruel and damaging. She had no idea that by the end of the day, she'd become a pawn in a prison breakout, or that she wouldn't be the only one who wouldn't make it out alive. That day, 3 inmates, Andy Bruce, Dwight Lucas, and Claire Wilson, decided they were done with prison. They took 15 people hostage, hoping it would be their ticket to freedom. Chaos erupted, and in the middle of it all, Mary made a choice that sealed her fate. She volunteered to be the main hostage. Now maybe she thought she could reason with them. Maybe she just wanted to protect other people. Whatever the reasoning, she was the one left outside with the inmates, while the other hostages were kept in the penitentiary's vault. For 41 long hours, she stayed with her captors. 41 hours of uncertainty, of trying to stay calm, to de-escalate, to survive. But in the early hours of June 11th, everything spiraled out of control, fast. One of the hostages tries to fight back, attempting to disarm the inmates watching over him. And during the chaos, other hostages took the chance to lock themselves inside the vault, leaving Mary outside alone with the inmates. That's when the armed prison guards stormed in. Mary was then used as a human shield, held in front of Bruce to protect him from bullets. She was shot twice. At first, prison officials said she was stabbed by the inmates, but the coroner's report tells a different story. Mary had been shot by the very people sent to rescue her. For months, there were questions. Was it an accident? Did someone panic? Then, Andy Bruce testified in court. He claimed a prison guard named Albert Hollinger was the one who fired the fatal shot. According to Bruce, Mary had already been shot twice in the jaw. Even then, she crawls in front of him and screams, "Don't shoot him." Then came the final shot. The jury will tell you that the shooting wasn't intentional, and the guards had believed her life was in danger and acted accordingly. But the case led to one major change. From that point on, untrained prison staff would no longer handle hostage situations. Special tactical teams would take over from now. Too late for Mary, but maybe in time to save someone else.
Corrections officer Mary Johnson was killed inside the Robertson unit on the northeast side of Abilene. Early yesterday morning, other officers found her unresponsive near the prison's kitchen.
July 16th, 2016. Mary Johnson walks into work that night like she had many times before. She's been here for 7 years as a correctional officer at French Robertson's unit, a max security prison in Abilene, Texas. It wasn't an easy job. It was exhausting, thankless, and dangerous. But Mary took pride in it. She was 55 years old, and while some were thinking about retirement then, Mary was dedicated to her work. She knew what was at stake. She knew the risks, but nothing could have prepared her for that night. Sometime after 3 a.m., Mary was found unresponsive near the kitchen area. By the time help arrived, it was too late. She had been beaten, strangled, and left handcuffed to the floor. The man responsible was Dillian Gage Compton, 21 years old, already serving 25 years for aggravated sexual assault of a child. He was young, violent, and already had nothing to lose. That night, Mary entered a storage area near the kitchen. Compton was there, waiting. Nobody knows exactly what was said, if there were any warning signs, or if Mary even had time to react. Now, what we do know is that she fought back. When they found her, her throat had been crushed from top to bottom. What's more, scratches covered Compton's face and neck, proof that she hadn't gone down without a fight. She'd been alone, no backup, no second officer, no one to help her. Mary's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a failure. Texas prisons had been understaffed for years. People there were working long hours in more dangerous conditions with fewer resources. And after Mary's murder, prison officials and union leaders sounded the alarm. Lance Lowry, president of the state's Correctional Employees Union, pointed out that Texas had twice the number of inmates as New York, but fewer correctional officers to keep them safe. So, why was Mary alone? Why wasn't there backup? Would she still be alive if someone had been there to help? Those are the questions no one wanted to answer. And 2 years later, Compton was sentenced to death for Mary's murder. It was a rare sentence, even in Texas. But was it justice? Well, for Mary's family and her friends and co-workers, nothing could bring her back. A prison official called the verdict a small measure of closure. But there was no real closure, because Mary shouldn't have died that night. She should have gone home after her shift. She should have been protected, but that didn't happen. By January 20th, 2012, Sergeant Barbara Esther had spent 12 years working inside the East Arkansas Regional Unit. She knew how things worked and knew the dangers, but she also believed in doing her job the right way, keeping order, enforcing the rules, making sure contraband didn't make its way inside. So when she saw Latavius Johnson, an inmate serving life for murder, wearing a pair of unauthorized tennis shoes, she did what any correctional officer would do. She told him to hand him over. Of course, she expected some pushback, maybe some attitude, but what she didn't see coming was Johnson pulling out a homemade knife and stabbing her straight in the abdomen. She made it as far as the prison's infirmary, where she collapsed in front of stunned medical staff. They rushed to help her, but a few hours later, she was gone. Okay, Barbara was a correctional officer, but you know what? She was a wife, a mother, and someone who had dedicated over a decade of her life to a job that most people would never dare to do. Her husband also worked in corrections, so did some of her other family members. And so prison life wasn't just her job, it was a part of who she was. She believed in structure, discipline, and fairness. She believed in doing the right thing and never backed down. And she certainly never expected that doing something as simple as confiscating a pair of shoes would get her killed. The shank was made from a piece of air conditioning vent wrapped in an ace bandage to form a handle. A simple, crude weapon, but in the wrong hands. Deadly. And those wrong hands belonged to Latavius Johnson, 30 years old, a man with a violent past. Already serving life for first-degree murder, Johnson was no stranger to trouble. He had countless disciplinary violations, frequently ending up in solitary confinement, and was infamous for just being a problem. And yet, somehow he still had access to a weapon. Barbara's death rocked the Arkansas Department of Corrections. Prison officials called it a senseless tragedy, one that left officers across the state shaken and heartbroken. She was the second correctional officer in Arkansas history to be killed by an inmate. In the aftermath, they took Johnson to Varner Supermax, a higher security facility designed to house really dangerous inmates. 2014, he was finally given the death penalty.
The body of Jamie Bendel was found at the chapel at Monroe Prison Saturday. Byron Scherf, the man suspected of killing her, has a history of violence against women. He was serving a life sentence for his crimes.
On January 29, 2011, Jamie Beendle was supposed to finish her shift at 10 p.m. She's been working here for 9 years at Monroe Correctional Complex in Washington. This also wasn't an easy job, but hey, she was good at it. She was dedicated, tough, and respected. She would work in the prison chapel, overseeing religious programs for inmates. It was supposed to be one of the quieter places in the facility, but Jamie had concerns. Big ones. She had told her union steward and prison supervisors she felt unsafe. She was the only officer assigned to the chapel, though. No regular check-ins, no one watching her back. She tells them she doesn't feel comfortable. And still, nothing changed. And that night, Jamie's fears would come true. She didn't make it home. At 9:14 p.m., officers noticed something was off. An inmate, Byron Scherf, 52, was missing from the routine count. 3 minutes later, they find him in the chapel lobby. When they questioned him, he admitted that he had planned to escape. But the truth was far worse. Jamie had been locking up for the night when Scherf, who had been working as a volunteer chapel worker, attacked her. She fought back, left marks on him, but Scherf was over 100 pounds heavier, and so he overpowered her and used a cord from an amplifier to strangle her. He wrapped it so tightly around her neck that when officers found her body, they didn't even realize what happened to her. She was just lying there. In the same place, she told him that she felt very vulnerable, alone. But did anyone listen? And after her murder, prison officials insisted that staffing levels weren't the issue. They said,
"The staffing model has been the same for years."
But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? Jamie already felt this coming, and she asked for change. But it looks like she had to die for anyone to pay attention. As for Scherf, well, he was serving life without parole for kidnapping and raping multiple women. So what do you do with a man like that? Someone who already had nothing to lose. Well, he confessed immediately, and he even said,
"I deserve to die for this."
The jury agreed. 2013, Scherf was sentenced to death, but in 2018, the Supreme Court overturned the death penalty.
Today, I am mandated to take back that sentence. The Supreme Court has spoken. You will not be punished for the killing of Jamie Beendle.
And just like that, his sentence is reduced back to life without parole, exactly where he was before he killed Jamie. Nothing changed for him. But everything would change for Jamie's family, her co-workers, and the prison system that failed her and so many before and after her. May 15th, 1981. It all started with a phone call. Correction Officer Donna Payton was just a month into her new assignment at Green Haven Correctional Facility, a max security prison in upstate New York. At 31 years old, she was already experienced in this job. Her husband was a correction officer as well, and she knew the risks. And that afternoon, as she's walking the prison corridors with her co-workers, the phone rang. A fellow officer picked it up, then turned to Donna and told her,
"It's for you."
She took the receiver, listened for a moment, then nodded, saying,
"I need to take care of something. I'll be right back."
She never came back. Hours passed. At 6 p.m., Donna was supposed to report for her next assignment. She didn't. By 8 p.m., her coworkers are now worried. She wasn't the type to just disappear. A prison-wide search began. Every corridor, every cell, every yard. Nothing. By midnight, they would bring in the bloodhounds. Still, nothing. Then the next morning, they checked the landfill, where the prison's trash was dumped, 20 miles away, and that's where they found her. Donna's body was wrapped in plastic, dumped like trash, her hands tied behind her back. Her uniform was ripped, a cord wrapped around her neck, but it would be the mutilated body that really stood out. Wounds that weren't just about killing, but more about control, power, and cruelty. It was the signature of a killer they already knew. His name was Lemuel Smith, and he was already serving life without parole for at least 5 murders. He was a serial killer, a sadist, and one of the most dangerous men in the New York prison system. But somehow, despite his history, he'd been assigned to work in the prison chaplain's office, the very place where Donna was last seen. He had lured her in, using the phone call as a setup. He would strangle her, mutilate her body, and then stuff it into a 55-gallon drum, and then dumped her in the prison's trash. And just like that, Donna became the first female correctional officer in U.S. history to be murdered on duty. Lemuel Smith was charged with her murder. In 1983, he was sentenced to death, the only punishment left for a man already condemned to life behind bars.
Do you deserve to die?
Do I deserve to die? Not according to my standards.
But again, just like Scherf, it didn't last. Just a year later, the New York Supreme Court overturned the state's death penalty, commuting his sentence back to life in prison. So in the end, nothing would change for him as well. And this poor woman might have been the first one to be murdered on duty, but as we've seen in this video, she wasn't the last. Her death should have changed everything. Better safety, more protection, some real change. But nothing happened. And many more correctional officers still walk into danger every day, outnumbered, unarmed, and very vulnerable. So, how many more tragedies will it take before real change happens? One of the many questions that needs an answer.